You made it. Look at all these beautiful faces. Hello, Miss Kimberly. She's like laughing in the flesh. Listen, y'all. I'm glad to see y'all. Oh, here comes Miss Dolen. Admit all. Hello. Miss Dolen, welcome. Jessica.
Hi. How are you?
I'm in softball mode. I just came from the softball fields. My daughter has a scrimmage game that started at 6:30, so I was out there helping her team and then dashing off here.
I do understand.
I'm like divide and conquering right here with.
Oh, wow.
So one of the other moms is live streaming it for me. So I was like, I can at least glance and see. My she plays 10, but she's switched over from hitting right-handed to being left-handed. And so this is her first game, like hitting live pitching. So I'm like nervous for her.
I know. I wish we could all watch.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Well, welcome. I'm so happy to see all of these faces. Still people coming in.
Okay.
This is making my entire night. I've been so excited about this. I'm so excited that we have Miss Dolen Perkins-Valdez with us in this incredible book. I am a huge, well, I've come to find out that I love historical fiction. So that's become a thing in the past year for me. And I'm like, I crave it. And especially like slavery for me is like a big one that I love to read about, and just it fascinates me to see how resilient Black people are and what they've been through. And so this is a book that actually someone had recommended to me, a male. I was on a podcast probably maybe 2 years ago, and he had read it at the time and highly recommended it to me. So I knew that it was going to be a book club selection at some point. So I was glad to finally put it in our lineup for 2022, and it did not disappoint. So how are you ladies feeling? Everybody enjoy? Did everybody get it done? Because I know some of y'all are procrastinators. Look, I know some of y'all are down to the wire sometimes reading these books.
It was good today. I actually finished yesterday. So
look at you.
Finally.
Like I know my people
last week. I want credit for finishing last week.
I finished last
week. Happened ever
before. I finished today.
Okay.
But early today. But I got like,
so you were ahead of the game. Yeah.
I was a little bit, and I got like 2 solid hours of reading done at the nail shop yesterday. That was perfect.
You always, I don't know how you get good reading in. My lady likes to talk to me.
They don't talk. They see me with my kid and they leave me alone.
They're like, leave me alone. Yeah, I know. Okay, so I do want to dive in and kind of kick it off because this will be posted to YouTube and whatnot, and talk about Wench and how beautiful of a story this was. I'm sure it looks like most people or everyone in here enjoyed it as well. I'm so happy to see some new faces on here. This is like absolutely incredible. So welcome to everybody who's new. We've got some long-term members in here too, so I'm thankful everybody's here. But Ms. Dolen, I do want to just kind of start off with what inspired you to write Wench. And I know, it's based partly on some true events. So I wanted to see what inspired you to write about it.
So first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's
You're
great to be here.
Yes.
I may have to mute and yell at my kids and then unmute real quick.
That's fine. We understand.
So I apologize in advance if you see me mute.
No, you're fine.
Wearing my sunflower tonight in support of the Ukraine and
I love it.
the Ukrainian people. Very disturbing what's going on over there for us freedom-loving people.
Yes.
I have a document open on my other monitor here because these are my Wench notes because it's been so long and my memory is not good, and even though I wrote it, I don't remember what I wrote. And I've got my book here. I looked through my book today to remind myself, so I apologize in advance. I have to
no problem.
because I used to give presentations on the book all the time, but you know, it's so funny when you look back at something that you read, you think that you wrote, you think, how did I have all of that in my brain at that time? And because as soon as you publish it, it kind of just disappears.
Right.
And so, you know, I've now written the third book and I'm working on the fourth. So this is like 3 books ago. So I'm really trying to remind myself
The
of
debut.
all
Yes.
of this. All of
Yes.
this. So I apologize if you see me glance over here. These are
No, that's totally fine.
Okay.
Listen, I have my notes here too, and I just finished reading it. So I have a whole, I do it too. I have to take notes. I have mommy, I suffer from mommy brain is what I tell everybody. So
yeah.
I have to jot everything down or it's gone.
Mommy brain is real.
Yes.
Okay, and so is old brain. So tell me what the question was again.
What inspired you to write Wench?
Okay, now my dog is scratching on the door. So in the spring of 2004, and this is why I mean this we're talking about, you know, 18 years ago. So in the spring of 2004, I was preparing to give a talk on W.E.B. Du Bois. And I read, one second, my dog is scratching on the door. Let me just let him in. 1 second.
Sure.
Another feeling.
Right. I was like,
Not a
Jessica's
big
got a whole
deal.
army over there, so she knows.
I just called my husband. I was like, get her. She's whining by my seat.
That's hilarious.
At least I'm not one of those people who has the cat walk across the screen. And
Oh, just
so
wait.
distracting.
My dog that thinks he's a cat might walk across the screen at some point.
So back in 2004, I was preparing to give this talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, and in preparation for it, I was very intimidated to give this talk because, as you know, Du Bois was a monumental figure whose career spanned, you know, decades, and whose body of work is huge. So I read I felt like, you know, if I could read David Levering Lewis, if I could read some of Du Bois's work and read this David Levering Lewis biography of Du Bois, I would be prepared. So I got through like half of the Lewis biography, the first volume. And he mentions that Wilberforce was originally a resort where Southern enslavers would come up in the summertime with their slave entourages, and they and among that entourage would be these women who they were in relationships with and who they had children by. And that was all he said. And then I was very curious about that because I said, wait, Wilberforce was originally what, you know? And then I looked at the bottom. I saw there were 2 footnotes. Just out of curiosity, I gave the talk and I ordered the 2 sources through interlibrary loan. And they came, and they were not real sources. They were sort of like secondary sources. They were not real primary sources. And I wanted to know more, and I just began to dig, and I got in touch with a librarian at the archives, or I should say an archivist at the Ohio State Archives in Columbus, who began to help me long distance and making photocopies for things that I needed. And eventually, she, I think, expected me to pay her. I wasn't paying her because I kept bothering her. And eventually she got tired of doing all this labor for me for free, which now I know better. I would never ask anybody to do that. But back then I was, young scholar, just following my curiosity, not knowing what I was doing. And she said, what are you doing with this? And I said, I don't know yet. And she says, okay, well, we have a service, and if you want to make use of our service, you can go through the proper channels. And so then I did that. I got funding from my university, and we paid to have them make photocopies and have them do searches for me and stuff. And then eventually I contacted David Levering Lewis to find out about other sources. And he, at the time, was retired, still is retired. I'm imagining he's still alive. I haven't heard any different. And he reached back out to me after I tried to contact him. He had no idea who I was. And I wanted to know what other sources he knew about this. And he said, well, I don't have any other sources for you, but I grew up in that town. And I believe that some of the descendants of these unions were my childhood playmates.
Wow.
And I said, what what is that? And so that was when I knew I needed to travel to Ohio. I needed to go there. And I called my girlfriend who teaches at Occidental College in LA. And I told her, I said, I've been exploring this little idea. I said, but I can't find that much on it. I'm thinking about turning it into a novel. And she said, girl, that is fascinating. If you don't write that book, I'm going to write it. And then later, of course, she said, I don't remember saying that, but it does seem like something I would say. But she's still the girlfriend that I call when I want to run an idea by her. She's like, you know how you have like that smart friend? She's my smart friend. And she can always kind of guide me whether or not I'm just, on a wild goose chase or whether I have something. So she told me that. And when she said that, I mean, she didn't literally mean she was going to write about it, but what she was saying was that that's really fascinating. And so that was when I was like, okay, maybe I'll make a novel, since I couldn't find any firsthand accounts from the women. The only thing I was finding were like the guy who owned the place. I found his notes. I found a map of the place, which appears in the very beginning of the book. It's not very clear, but it's actually a very clear, large poster-sized pen sketch of the resort. And there's actually a marker. Now, the original Wilberforce has now moved because it was destroyed in the 1970s by a tornado. And so it's sort of down the street. But now on the site of where Tawawa House is Central State University. And they've erected a marker. Did you go there? Did you go Central State? They've erected a marker there. So even though most of the original buildings are gone, there is a marker there. The ravine that I mentioned in the book is still there, even though it's now pretty dry because of deforestation. A lot of the water sources are gone from that region. But so that was kind of how it all became like at first I thought I might write an essay about it, an article, something like that. But the more I hit these brick walls, the more I realized, like, I think this is a novel. I'm going to have to imagine what it was like to be one of these women.
Wow. You did an incredible job. Like, that is so fascinating. So the timeline, when you're doing all of this research and trying to get all this information, about how long, I guess, from that point until the book was actually finished, how long did that take?
It took about 4 years. And, the way I describe it is during that 4 years, I had a full-time job. I had a 1-hour commute to work every morning and every afternoon. And I had a baby in 2007.
Wow.
So
you were busy.
I feel like when I used to look back on it, I used to think like, oh, if I'd only had more time, I could have gotten it done quicker. But then now I've realized, 18 years later, I never have enough time. I just will never have enough time to do anything quickly. I'm trying very hard to speed up my process, but I'm averaging 5 years between books.
I was gonna ask, that was gonna actually be one of my later questions, or actually I can ask it now, but like, if writing your books now, if there's any difference from your first book and how long it took, or maybe the process into like your release that's coming in the next couple months.
I mean, I think the one that's coming now I'm 7 years between book 2 and 3. And I think that the thing that delayed the second book, frankly, I'm gonna be honest with you, was Trump, right? Like, I did not feel like I had my brain. I did not feel like I was working during that time, but I was very, very distracted. So I would just say that I think it takes me about 5 years, but I am, now that my kids are both a little bit older, I am trying to get more efficient with my time. I know what works and what doesn't work. I know my process better. One of my writing mentors, Tina McElroy-Ansa, told me one day, trust your process, Dolen. And I think in the early years, I didn't even know what my process was, but now I know I need my headphones. I know I need something in a coffee cup. I know I need to be alone. I can't write with people around. I know what I need to do to get it done. I know I need a big monitor because I can't see that good with my laptop. And I used to think like it was okay to be on the small laptop, but really what would happen is my eyes would get tired and then I would quit. And I thought it was just because I was tired, but really it was because I was straining, and the blue light, I've learned about that. So, I guess as we do this longer, we start to figure out what works for us.
That's awesome. It's good to hear too, like, because I think when we look at authors, we think that they're just sitting there banging out books like, every year. And some of them are, but they
Some of them
probably put in,
are.
right, they're probably putting their time to where they're making money, and that's all they do is write, instead of having full-time jobs. Because I know, a few of us in here have thought about writing books and things like that, but like realistically in my schedule, it's like, where do you find time? But I guess you just kind of have to make time when you really want to do
It's
something.
very hard to find time, very hard. I have
Yeah.
all kinds of tricks up my sleeve that I have to rely on, like that might sound silly to somebody, but I have to rely on them, otherwise it doesn't get done.
Yeah. And so for your first book, I think for me, like the motivation to actually sit down and discipline myself, like, where do you find that from to actually, especially your first book? For me, was there nerves there in taking on this task of doing something for the first time?
I actually think the first book in some ways is the easiest because you haven't been hit with Goodreads and Amazon reviews yet. So you're like blissfully ignorant of what, trials await you. Once you publish that first book and you feel the sting of the reader's perception and really often truthful, right? Truthful, incisive review feedback, then you start to get nervous, and then it's like really important to relax. Like Celeste Ng, I don't know if y'all have read her work, Little Fires Everywhere, etc.
Yes.
So she, of course, has had tremendous success, and she and I knew each other. We were at a writing fellowship years and years ago, and I've watched her grow from a young writer to a hugely successful writer. And recently she sent me an advanced copy of her new book, which is coming out in the fall. And it was so good, y'all. I mean, it was such a confident, assured writer on the page. I mean, she knows exactly what she's doing. Her language is really confident. The structure was really tight. I have to say, the thing that impressed me even more than the writing, and the writing itself is absolutely impressive, and it's a great book, and I think it's going to be a huge hit. The thing that really impresses me about Celeste is how calmly and gracefully she has handled the pressure of producing another book that does as well as the last one. Because when like for me, it was really difficult after I had a first book that was a huge hit. There was a lot of pressure on me from my publisher, from my readers, and I felt like in some ways I had to just get through the second book, right? And the writer Tiari Jones told me this years ago. She said the second book is always the hardest. You have to get through it. And so I think it's just the nerves, and like, you have a book and your publisher makes little hints like, can you just write the same thing again? And you don't, like, you're a writer, you don't want to write the same thing, you want to write something else.
else.
So I think the first one, you're blissfully ignorant. The second one, you are feeling under pressure. The third one, you start to get your rhythm.
That's awesome.
That's my take.
Yeah, no, that's very good advice too. So in talking about your second book would be Bomb, correct? So is that, I read the description, but it didn't seem like there was any, I don't know if it's considered a sequel or it's a standalone. Okay. And that's what I
had a lot of thoughts, and I journaled a lot about writing a sequel to Wench because so many people told me they didn't like the ending and they wanted to know what happened to these characters.
Yeah.
And I have honestly considered it so many times. In fact, I've had like the inspiration. I think somebody wrote me something one time. It's probably in my notes somewhere. And they said something about what happened in the next historical period. And I thought, that's the sequel. I'll have to remember what they wrote me. But I don't know. I always want to do something. My husband says he hates to enjoy one of my dinners I cook because he knows I'm never going to cook it again the exact same way. He's like, why are you always changing the recipe? You never, he's like, I don't even tell you when I like something because I know the next time you cook it, it's gonna be different. Because I'm always like, well, maybe this would have been good with some, and I feel like I do that with my work. It's like, okay, I think I can write that sequel, but maybe I'll do this instead. And then I end up,
Yeah. And Jamie wrote that she enjoyed Bomb as well. And it's funny because Jess and I were just talking about it the other day. It was like, okay, well, maybe in March that we're going to move on to Bomb and read that too, because we enjoyed this one so much and we had some, good conversations across it. And it's right up my alley and what I love, like, Yellow Wife, like we read that as a book club last year. And I just finished The Personal Librarian earlier this year. So it was, so I am just historical fiction. I'm like, give me it all. I absolutely love it. So excited to move on to Bomb. We like to collect ebooks in our group. So we're always just buying, and Jess and I were like, I think I have that one already. And I was like, you probably do, because I know I posted it in the group as a deal. And so like we jump on it. Once we see something, we're like, oh, that's interesting. Let's get it. And at some point it comes back around where we're like, okay, we already have it. So we're good to go. We can get started with reading. Does anybody have any questions or commentary before I move
Well, I
forward?
wanted to follow up on the sequel part. So people who have been here, they know that my son, who's now 10, he was 9 when I joined. And for his first book was Yellow Wife. I let him listen to that and he really enjoyed it. So he listened to the Audible with me, and I just wanted to say, when we got to the ending, he was like, I need another ending. What's happening here? So I did want to let you know that even a 10-year-old was like, wait a minute, no, this is not finished. I want more. So thank you.
No, and that's why I say the readers often, y'all give the best feedback. And so even though it can be painful to hear, it's often exactly what you need to hear. And I'll tell you, it helps me to be here and have these conversations with y'all. So I urge you to, be honest. The most honest readers are like high school students. So not even just 10-year-olds, because I go to a lot of DC high schools and through my organization, Penn Faulkner, and we give out a book for free. The teachers request what book they want to teach. We provide it for free. And then the writers will go into the schools. It's called Writers in Schools. Well, I do a lot of those because a lot of the DC teachers like to teach Wench. It's just a good sort of teaching book. It's accessible for the average high school student. And they're always saying stuff like, why did Lizzie have to, why would she have to tell on Mawu? Why did she do that? She would just snitch. Or they'll say like, what did they, at the end, what, I don't understand your ending, it's like, it's hilarious, but they tell me to my face in really, unapologetic language. And I love being there with them. I love it. And I go back for more, and it's always the same. So, the way I look at it and the way I kind of frame it to them, I say, well, it is my first book. I still intend for that ending to be the way that it is, because in my mind, I didn't want it to end too neatly, because I knew that for many enslaved women, there wasn't a happy ending, right? It wasn't going to be like, because I know like some readers like, well, I wanted Lizzie and Philip to get together, And I love reading about like Black love in that time. Don't get me wrong, because I know that existed too, right? We wouldn't be here. Right. Black love going on. But I wanted it to feel like the victory for her was her self-possession, right? Like the victory for her wasn't in escape or freedom. And then the other thing I always told my readers was like, the book ends in 1856. We know the war is coming.
Right.
And if she can make it for 4 more years, we know, or really, 7 more years, we know that she and her children will see freedom, And so that was the way I was thinking. But I know a lot of readers, wanted a different ending. And I think it would have been good to have a sequel, like to see what happened to Lizzie's kids. I think that would have been good.
I agree. I was interested in her kids, and I think the most fascinating part to me, although I couldn't stand Fran, like she was just, I wanted to fight her, but I thought it was so fascinating. Like at one point after that dinner, like a light bulb went off in her head, and she was like, I'm gonna start treating these children as if they're my own. And to me, that was just, it was just so wild to see like how she acted towards them. And then poor Lizzie, it's like, she really is no longer mom. She's just like this because they're looking at Fran as that figure, and it's a battle between, you know, being in your kids' lives and making them remember like I'm your mom, but also she has to kind of stay in her place and do as she's told. So it makes it very hard for them to bond. And it crushed me too to see like once the nephew came in and they were replaced, it was like the kids didn't understand and they were used to living a certain kind of life. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden it's like we're thrown away and we're living in the slave quarters and having to adjust to this life. So the kids were real fascinating to me, but especially like Fran and her role and how, I don't know, she was just looking, I guess, for that attention or to give somebody that attention, because Drill clearly wasn't giving it to, he was on to other things and you know, his relationship with Lizzie. So it just, it was very interesting.
Renee, I just want to say with what you said about Fran, I thought it was interesting as well that she went from trying to sell Lizzie to, in her own way, catering to her when she was going through like the bait. She had drank the tea and it was like, well, sit here. Well, okay, be next to me. Like, I don't really like you, but the whole woman thing. And so I'm still going to like, I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, my heart was racing at that when she was trying to sell her like on the sly, and I'm like, yo, where's Drill at? Like, come around the corner or something. Like, where are you? Because she was this close. And had she, what'd she do? Get sick on the horse or whatever? And that's kind of like what.
Yeah, she threw up, and he was like, hold up, are you trying to sell me a sick slave?
Right. I was like, that was her saving grace, was being sick. But I don't know. I really liked Lizzie. Didn't like her snitching, but you know, I kind of understood where she was coming from, but at the same time, I was like, come on, man. Enjoyed Mawu, Rini, Sweet. Sweet was another interesting storyline too. And I actually like, I kind of like Drill. I don't like, I know it's weird, but I felt like as someone's master, to me, he was on the kinder side. Like, I feel like he truly had feelings for Lizzie. That's just my take on it, is that I know it was weird how it started, how young she was, all of that. Everybody's looking at me like, okay, whatever. But I've seen worse masters, I feel like, in books and in stories in real life. So I feel like for that storyline, I feel like there were parts of him that was kind. I don't know. See?
Until he tied her up on the porch and made her drink out of a bowl like a dog.
Yeah, that was, at that point, like he started to change, like he started to shift his, I felt like he got meaner.
You mean his true colors came out?
Right.
She was, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you were talking earlier about being hard to find the primary sources, that had dawned on me when she got Rini's letter and then she burned it. And I was like, that's why we don't have a lot of these stories, because they couldn't keep that evidence on themselves. And it had never dawned on me before, you know, why. Well, my primary thought was they couldn't read, they couldn't write. But then, Rini's letter and the burning of it made me think about it on a different level. It's like, no, they probably were writing, but they could not keep the evidence.
Yeah.
And we have missed out on so much, you know, for multiple reasons, but that one just hit me in a different way in reading this book.
Did anybody get scared when she still had it under the mattress? I was like,
yes.
Why did she still have it? I was waiting for something to happen. You find it.
Yeah, she kept rereading it. And I'm like, okay, get rid of that now.
Burn it already.
I'm like, it's got New York, it's got everything on there. Like, if they want to find Rini, like it's pointing right to her. So I was just like, this is gonna be another way that one of her friends gets caught because she snitched or she's done something that just didn't help them. So Dolen, so the characters, were they in your research, did you find stories, like true stories about this that your characters were based off of, or were they kind of just something that you came up with overall and coming up with the book?
None of them were based on anybody that was at the resort. The resort was a dead end, but I was inspired by women's, I call them freedom narratives, but you had all of these, what they call slave narratives. Most of them were written by men, but a small percentage of them were written by women. I want to say something like 9%. Wow. And so you have like Mary Prince, and you have these women, and overwhelmingly reading those stories, those published accounts of how they managed to get their freedom. It's about their children, and it's about maybe they made it to freedom, but then they are trying to get their children out, and they're in the courts. Mary Prince was in the courts trying to get her children freed. And so over and over, there was for a long time this sort of, I don't know, this common story that it was only men escaping. And it appeared that, women were not doing it because, we couldn't handle being on the run and all that. But we know Harriet Tubman was crossing like hundreds of miles back and forth,
Right.
Although I think she must have been incredibly athletic to do what she was doing. She had to be like an athletic person.
Yeah.
But the truth of that is that women were much less willing to leave their children. Now, the flip side of that some of the male scholars have come along and says, well, it makes it sound like men were more willing to leave their children. But that wasn't the case either. I think there were quite a number of men who left and also tried to get their families out. But if if you think about just sort of like gender roles, I mean, we can put a sort of contemporary spin on it, but gender roles, the women were doing a lot of the caretaking. So, I was inspired by those true accounts. I was also very curious just about Ohio as a place, right? Because I knew that Ohio had this history of being a free state. I knew that many enslaved people had died trying to make it there across that Ohio River. And I knew that there were a lot of Quakers and Methodists and all kinds of other religious white people who were anti-slavery, and not just anti-slavery, but many of them were anti-slavery activists. Even the owner of the resort, he was a member of the state legislature of Ohio, and he was an anti-slavery activist. So I was just really curious about a woman who would be there in that situation and who would willingly return home. And that was how I came up with Lizzie, just trying to figure out her mind. Like, why would you go there and then go back willingly? Why wouldn't you try to escape, And that's kind of how I came up with her. But I think for her, on the surface, it seems like it's all about her children. But it's more than that. She has feelings for Drayle, she
Right.
does. And they're undeniable. And she is struggling with that. But that's why I went back in time to try to show how he groomed her from an early age. And I think it would be difficult for anyone to sort of free themselves from that kind of psychological hold.
I was going to say, she, you see her be conflicted a lot through the book. And I said, I can't imagine being in a state where life is so bad that you yourself want to get away, but then you also are like, what about my children? Like, you have these opportunities to escape and get out of there, but it's like, but my kids, it's like that battle. She went through that a number of times, contemplating the idea of freedom, but then it's like, how can I leave my kids kind of thing? And again, it's a connection to Drayle. Like, she was able to give him his first children. Like, that was, so for me, when I talk about his kindness, I guess, like, he has a soft spot for her because she was able to give him something his own wife wasn't able to do.
Yeah, and the reason I thought about him in those terms is because when I went to Wilberforce, there was this very nice lady librarian. I think I may have thanked her in the acknowledgments. who brought out the earliest student catalogs of Wilberforce. And there were pictures, well, not pictures, but, often sketches, sometimes pictures. But they were mulatto, and they were designated in the rolls as mulatto. And they were the children of these Southern planters. And what fascinated me is that, as I went down the list, it would be like 4 children, and they'd have M next to the name. And then it would say that they were from Mississippi, and they'd have the same last name. And so I had never heard of white men from Mississippi. There were some students there from, Texas and, Tennessee and Georgia. I had never, and you have to remember, it was a college, even in those early years. I had never heard of Southern white men sending their Black children to college and paying for them to go to college. I had never heard of that in my life. And I wondered what kinds of contradictions, these men must have had to want to educate. We always got the narrative that their children were labor, and that they'd had these children and they were kind of like helping to breed more slave labor.
Yep.
And but to think that you would actually, so my girlfriend, who is descended from, and we wrote about this in the Washington Post at some point years ago, from Johnson, who was the president who came into power after Lincoln was assassinated. He was from Andrew Johnson, not Jackson. He was from Tennessee, and her ancestors were enslaved by him. And when emancipation happened, he freed the young woman who was her ancestor, and he gave her money and a set of dishes, like expensive dishes. And he told her he was giving her to that so that she could make something of her life. And Margaretta's, I don't know if it's a great, something in the greats, ends up at Wilberforce and ends up becoming a teacher. And all of the women of her family are teachers, including her. She teaches here in Maryland. And in that direct line, matrilineally, they're all named Margaretta, which was also the name of the enslaved woman who Johnson freed. And, according to all historical accounts, he was a drunk and a rascal. And so it's not like a history they're proud of. But I think there's something in the fact that they passed that name down. And she said that for generations, they had the dishes, not all of them, but the dishes were also passed down. Wow. So there was something about that connection they had to him that was complicated, right? And they're all of the Margarettas are like really, really, really light skinned, even to this day. Like Margaretta always jokes and has me cracking up because she says on the first day of school, all the kids are whispering, daring each other to ask if she's white or Black. But like both of her parents are Black. Like they've never, they're just all the Margarettas those are all the descendants of Johnson. So there's just a lot of complicated history there. Just a lot of complicated history there that I'm fascinated by. That goes beyond, mistress, concubine, wench. It goes beyond language even.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting to me, like when I first cracked open the book and I saw mention of Chihuahua and Wilberforce, I had to shut it right away because I've lived in Wilberforce for 4 years going to college. And so I was like, whoa, this is too close to home. And I opened it up again and slowly made my way in, okay, I got to read this book. But the Chihuahuas is a apartment complex off campus where a lot of students live. So I was just like, wait, what? My cousin used to live in the Chihuahuas. And so to hear about it previously being a resort, probably not that structure, obviously, but just the name carried on. I was just like, this is crazy how history just pops up and going there. I'd heard of, as a student, we had heard of Wilberforce being kind of part of the Underground Railroad and all these things. And so it was just kind of like a revisit to me in terms of like other things that could have happened on the ground of where I earned my degree. It's just weird. It's so weird, but it was great. It was a great story.
We have a hand raised. I don't want to pronounce your name wrong. Is it Elena or Alina?
Alina, yeah.
Alina, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, back to what we were talking about with like the complicated kind of like relationships and stuff like that. One of the notes I had specifically for Drell, because like I was kind of with you, Renee, where I was like kind of rooting for him in the beginning, and then as he changed, it was like, oh no.
Right.
But like, I don't know. Do you guys ever think like, did he actually have feelings for Lizzie and the kids, or was it more of a convenience thing because that's what Fran never gave him? So it was like what he finally had, and it was like that kind of thing. It was more of a convenience. I was just interested in what you guys thought.
I personally felt like he had feelings, and that's kind of why I sort of liked him. And just even to like take her to this resort. I mean, even the way that they let them have that freedom on the resort to be able to dine, like, if you don't care for somebody, I'm sorry, but like, if it's, you just consider it as property, I'm not sitting down at a fancy dinner with you, getting you dresses and all kinds of stuff and doing the things that he did. So for me, a part of him did, to me, treat her like a human. When they, especially when they were on this resort, he couldn't do it, you know, back at home. But so I really felt like there was some type of feeling. And I think, again, having his kids and being able to give him those gifts, like, I think that kind of drew him closer to her. I don't know, somebody else can chime in, but that's just my.
I think
I agree.
visibility as her.
Mhm.
I think that they were both equally conflicted in how they felt for each other, because he knew that he should treat her a certain way as a slave, and he just, his desire to treat her better because of the kids and feelings or whatever, they just conflicted with the quote unquote standard of how a slave was supposed, or a slave owner was supposed to treat his property.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, was that we even though I have my discuss with him, we kind of have to evaluate him in the era he was in. You know,
Right, that's why I said to the best of his ability,
ain't no
then,
way,
right?
right. He
Feelings
didn't
as
know
we,
any other way. He had feelings for her, but it's like, but she's still my property. My children are my property. Like,
Right.
that's all he knew. Not excusing it. It's heinous. It's horrific, but it's what
The
he
time
knew.
period. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he ties her up on the porch, that y'all can tell that seemed really bother me. Ties her up on the porch, she's lapping water out of a bowl, but that was to protect. He still had that property kind of
mentality. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kept
That's
thinking
the
of Sally
they
Heming.
could treat them,
Except
it
I
was
felt
still
like-
like you.
Oh, go ahead. I
I'm sorry,
kept
go ahead.
thinking about Sally Hemings because I feel like they were the same in that he groomed her just like Thomas Jefferson groomed Sally. And so then when that happens,
That's right.
is it love? I don't know. I mean, she was how old? 13? Like
Mhm.
child. She's a child. And so I'm just kind of like, I'm having a hard time with that. Because I feel like those stories, when I just kept thinking like, this is probably how it went down with Sally Hemings. Like the whole time I was reading, I was like, this is probably there was some grooming that happened. She was adolescent, you know, and then it just went on. And then, you know, people tried to hype it up as this romance. And I'm like, can it be a romance? Because
13.
right.
in that era,
Right. And
that
so
was
like,
when
and so it's like this is
girls were getting married and stuff.
I think it was romance. I think it was romance on her part, but on his part, he was like a pedophile. He really was. He was a pedophile.
Call it what it is, Bernadette. That man was a pedophile.
Right. And she probably
Yeah.
the love because she didn't know anything else. I mean, that was just it. And isn't that how pedophiles kind of work? Like,
And he was able to manipulate. based on that.
like, I'm like,
Like,
that's
use
how
the
this whole-
kids.
that's how child molestation and all that works. Like, I get to
Yep.
you at 12 and you don't
And
know.
he tell her like, I'll have our son working in the fields or whatever if you don't
Right.
do. He was like using the kids to manipulate her too.
Yeah. So anything
Right.
she did was going to be, she was going to see it from a totally different perspective because
Yeah.
he was groomed to see it that way.
And she has no other man or love in her life to compare it to. So
Right,
for
because
her,
he
that
got there early.
yeah.
She was so young, yeah.
Right. He didn't get there when she was 19 or 20. He was
Yep.
there from the beginning. And so I'm just kind of like, I'm not gonna give him a pass.
You know what?
Yeah.
That was typical because it was whenever you could bear children. Like
Right.
in that era, they're not thinking there's no pedophile. I mean, there is, don't get me wrong. I'm saying, but in that era, there's no pedophile. You have your period, you can produce
And that's
children. It's
That's
time.
it.
right. But as far as how she felt,
Yeah. The mental
romance,
Mhm.
it's like, well, of course you see it as such. Because
I just mean I think that was everybody, slave or no slave. There was just an older, like outside of that, right? Children get married that young. It was like, this is when you do.
Right.
Wow.
I will
Y'all
say
ever
this.
see that movie about the country star Loretta Lynn, coal miner's daughter? I don't know if y'all saw
No.
that. And the husband like marries her at like 13, and
Yeah.
you know when he has sex with her, it feels and looks like rape to me. It's just a real disturbing scene. But she's married to him, and you know her parents have like given her to this man. I don't know if I could have done it back then because my daughter's 14 and she is not nowhere near ready for
Yeah, I
nothing.
was gonna say that's some R. Kelly Aaliyah stuff right there.
My great grandmother was married
True.
my great grandmother was married at 14 and she said, and she had her first child at 15, I think. I think my great grandfather was either 18 or 21. It's conflicting.
Yeah.
My mom was 16, my dad is 21.
Well, but she said that her mom told her. She told me this herself. She said, my mom told me at one point, you know, you got to get a husband. Like, we can't keep feeding you.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
she was born in 1906. They were sharecroppers. So it's like, look, at some point in time,
get out.
You need to be out of this house and a man needs to be taking care of you.
Right. And the children,
yeah,
the boys, it's like, oh, third grade, that's good enough. Get out on the farm.
Yeah, she only went to the third grade.
We need money. Right.
Mhm.
I think even my mother.
Well, my mother was 16 years old when she met my dad. My dad was 37. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I thought 16 and 21. I was like, but yeah,
Right.
they were together till he died 41 years later. But yeah, I was like, well, what kind of childhood?
But you know what? One of my girlfriends pointed this out to me too. In addition to everything that we're saying, which is to me, truth is what it is. Even love or like marriage was more transactional back then, right? Like somebody would come to you, a man would come to a woman and say, I can take care of you, you know, and then you had to know how to cook and clean and stuff like that. You know, even when I was growing up, my mother would say, you need to learn how to clean. You're not going to ever get a husband if you don't know how to clean.
Mhm.
And she said that to my daughter recently. My daughter was like, what? Generation, okay?
Yeah,
I can't get that girl to do nothing. But when I was growing up, you had to know how to make a bed. You had to know how to, it wasn't just clean the kitchen. You had to know how to clean the kitchen, wiping out the sink, sweeping and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like one of the things we have to keep in mind, even with Wench, is that like it's transactional and there's something Lizzie gets out of it and there's something Drell gets out of it. And even with Drell and Fran, it's Fran's money, right?
Mhm.
So many, like, you know, the way that we think of love as contemporary people was very different back then. Love was like you love somebody because they held up their end of the bargain, you know?
Yeah.
You remember the old saying, he brings his money home?
Right.
I mean, you know, that, I don't know, people probably still say that, right? But that to me comes from that era.
Now it's he
I
gone.
think it's like he brings home the bacon and she fries it or she cooks it or something like
Well,
that.
I know where the direct deposit hits now.
That part. I do want to touch, like, I really wanted to see a romance between Lizzie and Philip. Also because I just wanted to see what Drell would do if he found out that she was, I just wanted to test the waters and see like how he would react. Cause I think for me, that would have really shown his feelings towards Lizzie. if she just moved on to somebody else, like, okay, whatever, you got
You
a
know
wife,
what? If
I
there
can have a
was
side
one
piece.
thing I would do differently, I would do more with her and Philip if I were to rewrite the book.
Yeah, that was
I
beautiful. Like
do
the
think
little,
that, yeah,
the
I like
interactions that
that.
we had, it would have been beautiful to see more of that, because I felt like their interactions, I love them together, as like just how
I do too.
caring how he took care of her. Like he didn't, sexualize her or do anything. That he just kind of let her be in her space, but he took care of her at the same time too, and gave her this level of comfort.
Yeah.
And I love that about him. He was such a gentleman, and I was just like, oh, it would have
I,
been nice.
I just didn't feel
I
like
think
he
Drea would
deserved
have had a
Philip.
fit.
I didn't feel like Lizzie deserved Philip, to be
Oh.
honest. Like, even when I was like seeing that trend, I'm like, he is so great. Like he's
Yeah.
so sweet. And maybe it was because Lizzie was a snitch and I just held on to it. But like, I really was like, Philip is too good for you. So like, I never pictured them together. Like, even though I did see like, oh, this could happen with the way it was written, but like, I never wanted that to happen.
I just really wanted to see how Drea was going to react. I think that was a big thing for me, because I'm like, is he going to lose his shit?
I think he would have got
lost
abusive.
his shit
I
even
think
if
would
he
have got
loves her or
abusive.
not, because she's property.
Yeah, he would have gone crazy.
I think would have got abusive. She would have got her butt beat then.
Probably so.
Or sold Philip or something like that, beat him, sold him, something crazy. It was enough leaving him by the tree.
Right. Yes, that was
so cruel.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was hard to read, that scene, and nobody could help them. It was, and they did their best though, in such a smart way, like taking the water hose and pretending like that was the digging the hole. I was like, that is genius. Like our people are so smart. Like yeah. Any last questions from you all about?
Quick question.
Sure.
I got a quick question. I know the hotel, the idea where the white people took that was real. What about the resort for the free Black people? Was that real?
Yes.
Really? Okay.
Now that I found references to in the sources, but I couldn't find any other accounts. But that was a real place.
Oh wow.
That's very cool.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a whole free Black, there was a whole free Black community in the Dayton area. Like when they go into town and they're in that little free Africa neighborhood or little Africa neighborhood. That was a real neighborhood in Dayton that had businesses and barbershops, and there was a real Black, I guess, merchant class, you could say, Black freed people who were business owners and who were catering to other freed Blacks, and they became well off enough to have their own little vacation place there in the woods.
Was it in the South though?
No, in Ohio, right near Chihuahua. It was like right near there.
Okay.
But I couldn't find a whole lot about it, but there's definite references to it in the newspapers.
Okay.
This isn't a question, but more of a comment. I just appreciated the sisterhood.
Yeah.
Because I think that when people say, I don't like slave stories, a lot of people won't ever even touch a book like Wench or The Yellow Wife, because they're just like, I'm not doing slave stories. But I think that these stories are important because they humanize us. They humanize our ancestors. Like, these people loved and they created community, and they created joy where they could. And I think that like this story really points that out. Like, even with all of this enslavement going on, they still had some good moments and they looked out for each other. I mean, even though there was the snitching thing, but beyond that, they looked out for each other. And so I think that's what I like most about books like this, is that it reminds you these people are people and they're human. And even though slavery is the backdrop, there's still all these other things going on. And so I'm very appreciative of stories like this.
100.
Yes.
And to Lizzie's defense, she did it out of love. She didn't
Correct.
I'm telling you.
Well, I don't want her to
Trying
love
to
me.
protect. She was trying to say, like, if you do this, you're gonna get caught. I don't want you to get caught and killed. Right?
Yeah.
She thought she was
Not as
helping.
much, but it's one of the first things mentioned on this. So like, I realized
The readers are very frustrated with her, and they're and a lot of times people say, well, I would have been Mawu if I had been back there. I would have been Mawu. But Mawu couldn't have survived. There's certain people
Yeah.
You know, like my husband, there's no way he could have survived. He's too hot-headed, too short-tempered. He would have been killed. He can't even handle getting pulled over by the police. I'll be saying, baby, be quiet. He pulled over by the police and be going off. And I'm like, oh God, he about to get shot up in here by the police. So, you know, I know that like it took to survive it, it took so many compromises. And not all of us, as you know, with our contemporary spirit, could have made those compromises, and Lizzie made those compromises. But you know, I wanted to say, like, real quickly, when this book came out, so many readers had slavery fatigue. Nobody wanted to read about slavery. Now, Edward P. Jones had come out. This came out in 2010. I think The Known World came out in like 2007. But no, you know, most people hadn't read Edward P. Jones. He was considered high literary. He's being read in academic circles, even though I think it's one of the greatest books ever written. It took people a long time to read The Known World in, you know, in the general population. But a lot of people were like, I don't want to read another slavery story. I'm just tired of it. And I think it had to do with the way slavery had been depicted, the way we had been taught in school. You know, I went to school in Memphis growing up, and it was horrible the way they talked to us. And it was so shaming. And it made you just feel so bad, you know, like after you go to history class or whatever, you leave and you just be thinking like, I feel horrible right now. I don't want to feel this way. And I really decided, like, I wanted to think about it differently. I wanted to think about, like, how you said, I wanted to think about, like, humanity and, you know, as a moment of victory and heroes and heroines. Like, these are people who survived something horrific. Many, not everybody survived it, but many survived it. Millions. I mean, when emancipation happened, 4 million people were freed and walked the country in search of loved ones. So I've always taught it to my kids in that way. I've always framed it in that way. This is a history of heroes and heroines, not a history of victims. But that was the way they fed it to us. And that's why it felt so shameful. And it took me to become an adult to say, this was not our shame. This was the enslavers' shame. They're the ones that need to carry the burden of that because they're the ones that did these horrific things. We didn't do anything.
Correct. Yep. And that's why I love that the shift in the terminology that we use is becoming more and more. They are not slaves. They are people who were enslaved. They were human beings with hearts, minds, souls. And that has been a powerful shift for me. I try to be very cognizant when I use the term. I do my best not to say a slave because they were not slaves. They were people who had been enslaved brutally.
Well, I do want to, you know, we're cutting close to time, but Dolen, I do want to ask you about your upcoming novel, Take My Hand, that comes out in April. If you could tell us a little bit about that and what we have to look forward to, that would be awesome.
Okay, I'll talk fast. I know we only have 2 minutes. Okay. I would hope that y'all would read that one next rather than Bomb because I really want to get that out quickly so that you know, people continue to know that Black historical fiction is important. Bomb and Wench are, you know, now in my backlist. I'm very happy to have a backlist, but you know, I want to continue to like speak to the publishing industry and know how important these stories are. This is a book set in 1973 Montgomery, Alabama, and it is set at a federally funded family planning clinic. It tells the story of this young nurse, Sybil Townsend, who's recently graduated from Tuskegee Nursing School, taken her first job at this family planning clinic. She gets these 2 little girls as some of her first patients. They're 11 and 13 years old, and the clinic has put them on birth control, and specifically on Depo-Provera, which is the shot. And she and her best friend begin to do a little bit of research and find out that Depo-Provera, hey, my dad's a Tuskegee alum. Hello, Tiger. So they do a little research and find out that the drug is not approved. It's not an FDA approved drug. And there's not a whole lot known about it. And there have been studies that show that it's actually harmful and causes cancer. So she is torn about what to do. And then something really horrible happens, which if you read any of these, people are spoiling what happens, but I want y'all to read the book. It's a quick read. It's quicker than Bomb. And it's Sybil Townsend is the main character. She's now looking back. She's a doctor now, and she's now looking back on this thing that happened 40 years ago and trying to tell her daughter what happened and her role in it and the guilt that she's carried about what happened all these years. It's inspired by a true story of these two young sisters who are still alive.
Oh, wow.
So I tried to be very respectful, but they are different characters than my girls, but it is inspired by this true story that I really wanted people to know about, particularly Black women, because this is our history. For a long time, I didn't write about this because I thought somebody had written about it. I didn't know nobody had written about it. And then I learned that nobody had written about it. Not this specific thing, but about the issue of Black reproductive justice, etc. I thought somebody had written a novel about that, but I didn't know, nobody has. So it's something that I think is going to be really important, because if the Supreme Court issues something that changes our lives, Black women will be the most affected in terms of reproductive rights and freedom. So my hope is that people will read this book and think about, somebody tweeted the other day, oh, my friend, I don't know, I think it was a retweet though, but my friend Corey said, Black women go through stuff and we keep on stepping and smiling. I don't know if y'all saw this. Most people couldn't walk in our shoes for one day and survive what we go through. Most people can't even read about it. I thought, wow, that's a really powerful statement. How many people, when you put something like this in front of them, they just shut down. They can't take it. Sometimes we can't take it because we just go through so much. But I hope that this is something that people will read and know the history about.
I had a hard time with Henrietta Lacks and
yes,
me too.
I read it, but I just had it haunted me a little.
It haunted me too, Jamie.
Yeah.
And just knowing that her family was still destitute
after
all that they did, just
crazy. Any other last thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, I'll ask one for a second time. I'll ask one of my two.
You're fine. No, you're fine. My child's being brought home now, so I'm good. I don't have to go anywhere now. You guys are good.
The second one is just kind of fun. The first one is, and you may have answered it. You probably answered it in a previous comment. What was some of the feedback that you got from this book that you learned from, or I guess that you learned the most from?
On Wench?
Yes.
I think one of the things I learned, I got to get the ending in a way, like I can't just think about the ending I want. I have to also think about the ending my readers want. So there's got to be a fine line between like what I think should be there and what my readers want. I think this is a really good question, by the way, to be good. And then the second thing I will say that I learned between this book and Balm was I learned what kinds of stories I was better at or best at, and what kinds of stories my readers wanted. And I feel like with Take My Hand, I'm back to where I was with Wench, which is something told in a really sort of clear way. And I don't know how to explain that better than that, but I learned a lot from Wench, a lot.
The other one was, how did you celebrate when you finished writing the book?
Good question.
Oh God, I don't know, a drink or something, probably. I don't know. I don't.
Any of your books, what's your normal routine for celebrating?
My normal routine is a drink. Like, I take a picture maybe of my manuscript. I don't print out anymore like I used to. I just write on my iPad. But in terms of writing with my Apple Pencil, I don't print out like I used to. But I'll have a drink. I might, I don't know. I don't do a whole lot because I then have to get to work on something else.
Yeah, always, right?
Well, they know I will suggest a very good cigar.
Oh yes, the queen of cigars over here.
My husband, we have one cigar smoker in the house, and he has to smoke outside.
Oh, I don't smoke in my house at all. I can't handle that smell in the house.
I know it's a lot, right? But he has his little laptop, watches movies. He have a whole little party out there with his cigars.
I usually go to a lounge. I'll do outside in summer or spring maybe, but
I was gonna say you've been on book chats where you've been in cigar
Yeah.
lounges, like
Oh, that's so
chilling.
cute.
Yep, she'll be on mute and you'll just see her in there. It's hilarious.
I love to see women smoking cigars. I think that's real boss, you know.
Yes.
I love them.
Yeah.
I think that one of the questions that we always talk about in our book chats, what are you reading now?
Ah, good one.
Oh, y'all, I just finished a book that is coming out in May. You know, I have to read a lot of stuff in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I don't know, my reading is crazy. But it's called Miss Chloe. Let me see, what is the name? So I don't know if y'all remember this writer from like the 1980s during the Black women's literary renaissance, A.J. Verdell. She had a novel called The Good Negress. Which was a really it's called Miss Chloe. Come on. That's what it says, Miss Chloe. Anyway, she's one of the sort of during the Alice Walker generation, but she only published this one novel and that was it. And I always wanted her to publish something else, but she didn't. And she has a new book, you know, the first in years, called Miss Chloe. And it is a memoir / love letter / literary, you know, reflection on her decades-long friendship with Toni Morrison, who she called Miss Chloe.
Wow.
And all the conversations they had and how reading Toni like helped shape her as a reader. She talks a lot about her own background, you know, growing up in DC, and how she met her. And she always called her, she was 20 years younger than Toni Morrison, but they became very, very close over the years. And Morris, she was in the circle. You know, Morrison only had a few trusted people. And it's written so lyrically, and y'all are gonna love it. I told Tracy Sherrod, who's publishing it, I said, this is gonna go on my treasured bookshelf. Like when it comes out.
I love that.
This is gonna be one that I keep. And I'm so happy that AJ, who is the nicest person in the world, she lives here in DC. And she's like, to me, she's an elder, you know? And I'm just so happy to see her have something coming out, because I know she's probably been working on this for years. But if you love Morrison, I mean, you're not gonna be able to put it down. I've read it in like a day.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't put it down.
Okay. I'm looking at, okay, May 10th is the release date.
It's like
So-
May 10th, May
May 10th. Yep, May
Yeah,
10th.
it's
I'm looking it
called-
up right now.
Oh, okay, that is okay. Yeah, It's
Yep.
called Miss Chloe.
Oh, yes, yes. It's the cover I'm looking at. I just pulled it up. The cover is gorgeous. It's like
Yeah.
almost like watercolor. I don't even know if y'all can see my phone
Let
at
me see if
all.
I
But
don't think I've seen
Yes,
this.
yeah.
It's beautiful. I pulled it up.
yeah, it's so gorgeous.
Too. Miss
Definitely will be
Chloe, I
grabbing that
love
one.
the title, using Toni Morrison's real name.
Yeah, and
Right.
she said she called her Miss Chloe when they first met. And she said, you know, Morrison sort of kind of did a little nod and was like, that's fine, you can call me that. You know,
Aw.
she said she never corrected her, because she said she didn't want to call her Miss Morrison, you know, but she also, you know, wanted it to be respectful but intimate, you know.
Right.
And
That's
so
so cool.
yes, it's a beautiful book. I just loved it.
Wow.
It's also just about like the reading life, the writing life, you know, coming of age as a young Black woman who reads, and
Right.
yeah, it's beautiful. Y'all gotta read it.
I was gonna say, sounds like it's right up our alley. So exciting. Well, thank you so much, Dolen, for taking the time to sit with us and go back in time, almost feels like, and revisit Wench with us, and
Yes,
absolutely enjoyed it. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a definite 5-star read for me. Like I told you, historical fiction, I eat this stuff up. So I am looking forward to your upcoming release, and we definitely will be grabbing a copy of that. So I'm gonna
Thank
save
you.
bomb and read that one next when it comes out, and add that to my list of April reads. I'm super excited because I posted, there's a video of you talking about it on YouTube. I guess Penguin Random House had posted or something.
About bomb.
Yes, no, of Take My Hand.
Oh, about Take My Hand, yeah.
Yeah, and so I posted it in the group today so that people could see. And so when I was listening to you talk about it, I was like, oh, this sounds so good. So really excited for that to come out. So
Well,
we wish
Renee,
you-
thank you for the invitation. Y'all were a fun group. This
Oh,
was a
you're so
great
welcome.
hour. I hate it's over. Usually I'm
I
like,
know.
I gotta go feed the kids, but since they haven't come and disturbed me, I have just enjoyed this time.
Awesome. We loved having you. So thank you
Yes,
so
we
much. It
enjoyed you.
really, like, you made our night by coming on with us.
Oh, thank you. I'll see y'all out there in the Twitter streets. Y'all
Yes,
on
I was like, I
Twitter?
see you out there tweeting all the time, so I love it.
I'll see y'all.
All right.
Well,
you
let
guys
me
have a
know
good
if you want
night.
me to come back. If you read Take My Hand, let me know.
Yeah, we might, even if we, yeah, we can definitely look at that. Maybe if
a
we do a
lot to
buddy
me.
read or something, we can get together and
Yeah,
talk
just
about
let
it.
me
So
know.
definitely. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye.
Y'all have a good
Y'all
night.
take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.